Of the recording. And Cassie, if you just want to give a sentence about what this training is about, and then you can jump right in.
Yep. Okay, so today we're going to train over 2 items. One is the system expenses form in the status report, and the other is in the awards. It's the ledger option. Neither one of these is new. They were both in the older version of the system, but it was brought to our attention that maybe you guys didn't use it in that system. So it's also available in the new user interface. So I'm going to show you how to set it up. And both of these do not have to be used. They're just nice features if you have the need. So we're going to start with the expenses form. If you guys are familiar with the reimbursement form, it works exactly the same way, except it's in status reports instead of in claims. So people go, well, why? Why would I want to do expenses in status reports? Well, one, if you're not connecting to I3, like if you have a program that's not being paid out of I3, not connecting with the finance system, or 2, maybe you do advanced payments and you do use claims to track the advanced payments, but then you want your grantee to come in and report how they spent those funds. You can do that in the expenses form in the status report. And again, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to walk you through it. But like I said, if you're paying them out in an advance claim, that's generally what this is used for. If you're paying them out, they can't come back in and report back on claims, or you're doubling up on the money, and it won't let you do that anyway. Right? So if you're making a payment and you need them to report expenses, it's literally the same exact form as the reimbursement, except it's in the status report. You do not build this form. You literally just add it to your funding opportunity. It will build itself based on how your budget is built, just like the reimbursement form does. So I'm going to start there with my funding opportunity. What you're seeing currently is the grant. This is the test grant I'm going to use. But on my other tab, here's my funding opportunity setup. If you're going to use it, you have to set it up first. It's really easy. It's in the status report tab. It's the expenses form. It's a program specific form. Again, it's custom. You can see that in the form type, just like your reimbursement form is. So you just simply add it, and then you can choose when they're going to report. So I put mine in as a monthly type, but you could say quarterly, or maybe it's the final report due before you close the grant, whatever report type you want. But it's called the expenses form. If you do not see this, go check in the form creator and see if it happens to be archived, because every program has their own. Again, you cannot modify this form. It builds itself based on how your budget is built, and it will look identical to your reimbursement form. Identical. It works the same way. The big difference is it does not feed back to the awards module. Okay, you don't have a voucher. So the claim reimbursement form, the identical form to it, has the voucher and feeds back to the award and goes to the finance system, I3. This form is just to report expenses, but it looks identical. So again, you're going to add it to your funding opportunity, set up the frequency, which is your report type. So I did monthly. Now I'm in my test grant. In order to use the expenses form, you have to have a budget. Okay, so don't make that mistake of having a crappy grant that doesn't have a budget, because if you don't have a budget, you're not going to be able to use this form. You're truly reporting expenses against the budget. So I chose a good test grant that's got a decent budget. And remember, your reimbursement form and your expenses form are built based on how your budget is built. Okay, so my budget happens to look like this. Okay, and then I've already got one in here that I approved. I wanted to show you how it rolls over. You can schedule your status reports. Everybody should know how to schedule your status reports. You can do it individually or in bulk. Or in this case, if it is like an advance, you could say, well, I've paid you. I'm not going to pay you your final payment. Some people do like advances, like they'll give 80% of the project up front, and then the last 20 at a certain point, usually towards the end of the project. Well, that last 20, you can say, well, I'm not doing that until you come in and do your status report. And so they could just come in and do it themselves. It doesn't matter how this report gets set up. If the grantee is just going to come in and click add, or if you're going to schedule it for them, it works just like any other form. So monthly is the type. I've already got one in here. That was for September. So I'll come in and do the October. And I'm going to log in as the grantee. Oh, goodness. I have a lot of grants. I think it's this one. Okay. So again, I'm in as the grantee. Going into my status reports. And remember, I set this one up as a monthly. So when I click add and create my report, I have all these types because of the program I'm in. The type drives the form. So I'm going to select whatever type I set that up as. Remember, you could have scheduled this. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So we're saying October. Now that form appears. Again, it looks like your reimbursement form. It's built like the budget. And if I would have had match on my budget, match would have shown here too. My budget didn't have match. So it's truly going to look identical to your reimbursement form. And I saw that this was in use in a couple funding opportunities. So some programs have used this before. Again, this is not a new feature. The reason why I show that I have some paid is because of that previous approved status report. So the funds will not roll over to this paid column until the previous reports are approved. This does not talk to your claims. So when it says paid, that's looking back at the status report. It's only talking to the status report. So it's only saying that I have previous paid claims because I have let me just show you. I have that other monthly one and approved. That's why it moved over. Now, had this been in submitted and not approved yet, it wouldn't have rolled over. But see, I had previously submitted in my expenses for $25,000. Now that that report has been approved, my second report is rolling the numbers in. And again, it's that approved status that makes it roll over. It has the same rules as your reimbursement form. Just not going to let them like claim over. It follows the same program area rules too. So if you're allowing 10% movement or no movement, it's literally going to follow the same exact rules your reimbursement form is. It's not possible to have a different reimbursement form than your expenses form. They're going to be exactly the same because they're based on how your budget's built. So enter my expenses. Again, you might have a match column if you're tracking match in your budget. And then I could have any number of forms also appear. It's just a status report. So I could have an attachment form or another progress report form that you've added at the funding opportunity, or it could just be the expenses form. Submit it in, and then you go through your normal approval process. I'm going to pause here, and I don't know where the chat is in here. Do we have any questions?
I can watch the chat, and so far no questions, but please, people, if you do have a question, feel free to ask that now.
Or if you've used it before, you can give us an example of what you use it for.
Yeah. So I know that OCIO and HHS were listening in because were interested in the advance payment function. So does anybody have questions about that? Ermine, Maggie, Stacy, Lance, Kristen?
Yeah, I could speak for a second here. So the issue we've been running into is that in our advance payment claims, we have them fill out the reimbursement table. So then when it has come to their final reimbursement claim, they didn't actually spend the categories that they said they did in the initial advance payment. So it's kind of like a misalignment. Some categories are overreported, underreported, etc., because it all does tie back to that original budget. So if we use this form, the status report, that wouldn't affect our payments, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's typically why this would be used is you would do an advance payment against whatever categories. Maybe it's, 80% across all of them, which is not accurate on how they spent it, but you paid it out. That goes to the finance system, they get paid. And you have them report their actual expenses in the status report.
Okay. And then, so you were saying that on the status report, if you approve previous ones, then those show up as paid in your following reports. Would the paid column also reflect actual amounts that have been paid, or are those not tied?
No.
Okay.
No, and this must have been aliased. I think we've aliased it because of your reimbursement. But when that says paid claims, that's really not talking to your claims. That is
Okay.
talking about the previous report that was approved. So had you adjusted it, let's say you went through the correction process on the first one, it's not going to roll over to this column 3 until you have approved it. So I've had some people say this is an issue. They've sent it in as a ticket, and then I go in and look, and they never did approve the report. It doesn't roll over until it's approved. So if it's still sitting there and submitted, it's not going to roll over.
Okay. That
And
makes
you
sense.
said-
Thank you.
Yeah, and you said that you so payments can be ran a couple different ways. Like you for example said that you still have your grantee come in and request a payment. A lot of people do it that way. I've had some people that don't have their grantee do it. They just internally go in and create a payment internally. It's more work on your side, but just depends on your program and your process. You can create the claim as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So Cassie, if I'm understanding this correctly, so if we are doing an advance payment option, we could just use this and not go through the claim itself? Is that what you're saying?
No, if you still want to track your payments, you would still use claims because claims is the only thing that's going to track the actual payment and tie down to the voucher and the award and fund source. This does not connect to a voucher at all.
Okay.
This does not go back to the award at all or I3 at all. It's just exactly the situation that I believe it was Maggie just said. We're advance paying them against these categories, and we just did 20% maybe across all of them, which isn't accurate because we just needed to cut them a check. But we need them to now come in and tell us maybe quarterly or monthly how they actually spent that money per category.
Okay, so it's a way to track for auditing, basically.
Yeah. And if you don't have the situation, this is not something that, every program necessarily uses. It's just a nice feature.
Okay, thank you.
You'll see too, it's a lot easier to use because it does not have the voucher. You don't have the fund sources and appropriations and all of that. It's literally just like a status report. So they're reporting their expenses. You go through the approval process and you're done at approved. The final status is approved, not paid.
Any other questions about this one? Okay, all right. Thanks, everybody.
The other feature is in the awards module. Let me find a test award here. I'm sure we have plenty. I need to find a test award that has money though. Money left.
Research and development should.
Well, I found one. It's for 2014, 2015 AmeriCorps, or AmeriCorps. Put the S on there.
Yeah.
That's not our program though. Let me see if I can find we might have tied all the funds down for the research, but I'll look. Yeah, see, we're at 100, but we do have the ledger. Oh, want to show them how to actually add it though. We're already at 100 here. I could take some money out. Oh, I really should probably start this brand new. Okay. So I'm at an award, breaking it down into fund sources. And again, this isn't a new feature, so you may already be aware of what this is. But the ledger feature, if you look on the right, you'll see that there are 2 grant blue buttons here. And then there's one that says ledger. The ledger, so this was available in the older version of the system, but a long, long time ago it wasn't. So I don't know how many versions ago it wasn't. And so you used to, back in those days, create like a fake grant that would be like for your internal admin funds. So it would be under the same funding opportunity. You would actually commit the, you would have a budget and basically an internal grant in the same funding opportunity to track your admin funds. You don't have to do that. You haven't had to do that for a long time. You don't have to have a fake grant anymore. You can run it all right in the fund source and never have to have that internal grant created. It's called the ledger. You have to set up the fund source for it. And you have to do it initially when you do it. And obviously you have to have funds. So that was the first thing I did, is make sure I had funds. Usually it's like 10%. 10% of the total award is designated to pay for administration fees or costs or whatever. So I'm going to actually add it as a fund source. So I'm going to click add. And I only have this amount available. So that's the amount I'm going to put in here. Like I said, it's typically, the number I always hear is 10% usually. Now this coding block is not going to go like talk to i3 or anything like that. It's truly for tracking. But I'm going to put I'm designated as admin. And the big thing that you have to do here is you have to check ledger. This prevents you from accidentally adding it to a grant. It won't even be an available option when you go to grant tracking and start committing funds and appropriations, which is really nice. You can say it's program admin funds or state admin funds as your type. But this ledger option, when you check that box, like I said, it's really nice because you can't accidentally commit your admin funds to a grant. And that's how you get the blue button to appear. Now it's really easy to use the ledger. Again, you don't have to tie it to a grant. You just come into this award and you'll click on that ledger button. So I actually have two ledger fund sources in this one award. You click on it and you just start adding your entries. Again, this is all about tracking. So when you click add, this is a global drop down. But remember, the awards module is all internal anyway. So it's really across all programs internally, the expenses you track, expense types you track for your admin, we can add to this drop down. It is global. So you shouldn't have like program specific language in there, but you could add other items. Just make them generic like this: salaries, travel, supplies, maybe equipment, or something like that. It is a system drop down. So that is something that Deb would send into support and say, hey, we need this, this, and this added to our fund source ledger expense type drop down. If you need any more than this is pretty typical. Put your accounting period in there, your year, and the amount. Super easy to use. Any comments? And the cool thing about it is it automatically commits it and expends it at the same time. So we've got 25,000 out of that. And if I go back now, it's showing me that it's already committed and expended. So super easy to use, and it does roll back up here. That avoids, I know some programs are still creating those grants that are internal grants. Now, if you need more tracking than this, or it does need to go to i3 or something like that, you're doing more than just this tracking, you would still have to do that internal grant. So I'm going to kind of turn to Dennis. You mentioned the internal grant. Does this alleviate that, or do you have other items you're doing on the internal grant that this wouldn't help you with? Because that's really it.
Yeah, this looks great, Cassie. The only thing I would say that we would want to be able to add to this would be an attachment so that we could provide some documentation at some level.
And that's a system form. Tina, is that? I mean, it would add an attachment note to all the fund source. Can we do that to this form?
I'm gonna check, but I don't believe so because, well, you could, but it would be like a global change, I think. But let me check on it.
Yeah, because it would show when it wasn't a ledger too. I know we can to the award.
Right.
I know we can up here add an attachment. I don't know about adding an attachment to the fund source itself.
That seems like, I mean, it would be optional, and it seems like it would be a system improvement across the board. So
Yeah, we just may not be able to get to this form, which means it would go to a developer.
Kristen, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, so you're saying you want an attachment on this, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, wouldn't hurt, but it sounds like Cassie said it might have to go to a developer.
Yeah, we're going to look into it. I was more looking for Dennis to kind of explain the current process. I probably didn't explain it very well. The internal grant that you guys create.
Well, yeah, we're pretty much doing what this does right now, but we're doing it. We're tracking our admin, and we're giving ourselves a grant. We set up a fund source for admin, and if it's 10%, then when 10% of the grant goes into a fund source for admin, then we add a grant to ourselves. As we have admin expenses, we go in, we submit a claim, we process the claim, we attach documentation for the admin because that's required in our program. And then we mark it as paid. We skip the I3 process. So this is a simplified version of what we're already doing. The only thing that's missing here would be an attachment, because we have to keep documentation, and for our purposes, it makes sense for this system to be a fully functional grant file with all of the documentation. And so we wouldn't want to keep the documentation outside of the grant system. We're currently putting it into the claim, so we'd want to continue to do that. So really, the only thing missing here for us is the.
Yeah, and that's maybe why you continue doing that process. Because again, this isn't new user interface. This is a pretty old feature. Maybe that's why you continued doing the grant. The other difference that you would be seeing at the grant level is you would have a full budget versus this. If you're adding multiple rows each period, you're having to click add each time. It's not a budget. It's truly adding each expense type every period, which could become, depends on how much you're reporting each month. And that's probably why I'm assuming you kept the grant, because you have an entire budget and you can go across all at once. So it really, you can use either way.
Right.
And attachments, if we could add something here,
It's
like
there.
yeah, she's got that here. It's one attachment because it's a single entry. So it's one attachment versus an attachment section that you could have at the claim. So there's pros and cons to both sides, and it's really how you want to track it. The benefit here, when you check ledgers, you can't accidentally sub-grant the money out, because once you've made it to where you're giving yourself that grant, that money is available to accidentally tie to a different grant too. But at the same time, it kind of makes it easier when you're claiming against a budget. So again, this isn't something you have to use. It's just a nice feature that's out there. Thank you for giving us that example, Dennis.
Anybody have any questions about this functionality? Does it sound like something that might be interesting for you to use? Is anybody already using it? I think Don used it inadvertently one time. Okay. No final questions? Cassie,
And
do you
they're
have any?
both,
Yeah, go ahead.
they're both easy to use and test. So if you want to try this out, you can go ahead and throw like the expenses form. You can throw it in your current funding opportunity and test it with your test grant. And if you don't want it, just remove the form. It really is just a form. It's a system form, so you can't modify it. And the ledger, just go into your test award. Everybody should have a test award for their program anyway. So these are both currently available and easy to test if you want to play around with them.
Okay, well, I don't hear any other comments. I want to thank you so much, Cassie, for your time today. I will stop recording.
Deb,
Yes,
I'm so sorry. Can I ask one additional question?
absolutely.
In the claims form itself, Cassie, I know we have like an option for reimbursement, and am I correct that there's like an advanced payment option in the claim form too? I don't know why it's ringing a bell, like,
Yeah, it depends on your program.
uh-huh.
So it's just like your status report types. There are different claim types.
So I guess what is the difference then between those two?
There's currently 4 in your system. One is for
Okay.
community services block grant. One's for environmental health and local public health services. The other one has lots of programs, and then reimbursement is available for all. So it's literally just like your status report dropdown list. It's a system dropdown that you will ask us to add a type to. But it's think about your status reports. Some of your programs have quarterly and monthly. Others have final. Others have maybe program specific ones. And those types only show up for those programs that are set. Like right now, projection cost is an actual claim type in the system, but it's only available for the CSBG program.
Okay.
EHS and LPHS have this reimbursement rate change. The type drives the form. That's the whole point of having multiple types in the system. The type drives the form. So if you have a reimbursement type where the grantee is going to come in and select reimbursement, they're probably not only going to fill out the system reimbursement, which ties to the voucher and the award. Well, we need that no matter what type if we're going to actually pay it. But with the reimbursement type, you're usually going to have an attachment form too that's going to, expect them to upload their documentation, their proof that they spent this money because they are asking for a reimbursement. Where in advance, they're not going to have receipts and invoices. They're asking for money up front. So by having 2 types in your program, and you should only have 2 types if you want the 2 types, because you don't want people asking for an advance when advance isn't available for that program.
Uh-huh.
But if you say, yes, I want to have advance and I want to have reimbursement, you can control what forms appear based on the type they select. In advance, you wouldn't include the documentation form. You would still include the system reimbursement form, and you can alias that because it does, when you get into an advance using the reimbursement form, you still have to use it, and it's called reimbursement. You can alias it in your funding opportunity to like invoice, but you really do still have to use the system reimbursement form because that's what ties to the voucher and the award.
Okay, so like if we choose advanced payment, does that tie to, so that pulls from the budget like the reimbursement form would?
It's just a type. It's
Okay.
not a form.
Okay.
So you go to your funding opportunity, and in the claim tab,
Mhm.
the reimbursement form has nothing to do with the type of claim. Okay, you have to use the reimbursement form, which some people will alias if they're using in advance. You can name it whatever you want to name it. You have to use the system reimbursement form in order to tie to the voucher and the budget and then ultimately the award. And you set it up for type. So you can say,
Okay.
well, I want the reimbursement form, the system form, the payment form basically, to show up no matter what type. This program that I'm in, research and development, happens to have 2 types available. This is going to show up no matter what. If they do an advance or if they do a reimbursement, they have to fill out this form.
Okay.
But I can also have, let's see what we got. I'm in this old test program, so we're going to try. I don't know if this is a good form, but we're going to try this documentation form. And like I said, they wouldn't have documentation on an advance. So I am now, just like in status reports, I'm controlling what form shows up based on the type. So they're only going to see the documentation form if they choose reimbursement. If they choose advance, they're only going to see this form. It's just like your status reports. You're controlling what forms appear based on type. So I didn't see, when I went and did my expenses monthly report, I didn't see my quarterly project report because that one's set for quarterly. Same concept. For a reimbursement, I'm going to get both of these forms. For an advance, I'm only going to get this one.
That makes sense. Thanks for going over that, Cassie.
And is Don on the meeting? Because he was the one, the CDBG was the one that had that other.
Yeah, no, he's gone all week, so he is not here. But that's why I wanted to record it to make sure people could listen later.
Yeah, no, Don doesn't need to listen. He's using another type. I was just hoping he could
Mm-hmm.
get some input on it because he understands this and uses more than one type.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really good information. So once again, thank you for your time in sharing this. I hope other people have found it to be beneficial. We'll try to figure out what happens here with the link, and I'll try to get that out to everybody in case you want to listen again. Are there any final questions, or Cassie or Tina, do you have final thoughts?
Just a note on that. If you do need additional drop downs, they are system drop downs. Both the drop downs I showed you today, the claim types, and back at the award ledger, those types. That's a global drop down list. Now here, when we're looking at claim types, you can specify them per program. So if you don't do an advance, it's not even an available option for those grantees. But that is a ticket. You can't just go in. You don't even see the system drop down. So that is something just like your status reports. I'm going to throw out, Kristen, you know, you had a new or different program the other day that didn't have any status report types, or whenever we add a brand new program, we go, okay, what status report types do you want? It's a huge list, and we add each type per program because you would never want this entire list because there's over 100 status report types in your system. And if you have these all available for your grantee in one single program, it's going to be very confusing. So that's why you said, wait, well, this program, we're going to use the performance measure, the quarterly and the monthly, and then you only see those three. Same thing for your claims, same thing for all your subcomponents, your amendments, your site visits, your contracts, all your subcomponents. The forms are driven by the type, and we can add more types, but they are per program, and it is a ticket.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Cassie, because that is one thing. When you guys need to set up new program areas, we have to send that to Tina and Cassie so they can get the correct report set up with it and make sure that it's set up correctly. We can't just add it. I kind of learned that the hard way too. So make sure that if you have a program area that you need a new one, that you send it to me, and then I will send it to them to make sure it's set up correctly.
And I know this isn't part of the meeting, but while we're talking about adding new programs, there's these settings. I know you went over it in the conversion of what the standard settings would be for the existing programs, but I'm not getting these settings for anybody that's asking for a new program. So I'm just basically sending a screenshot of how I set it up. But these settings, these claim properties, like if you want to allow them to go over and move money around 10% on the claim, or if they're stuck at 0 and they can't move around at all, this is really helpful when I set up a new program. You don't have to tell me. I'll set it up to the default and send you a screenshot like I have. And then once it's set up, it can be changed. But this is helpful too.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And that's where we have made quite a few changes for different program areas. This is set up at the program area, right, Cassie?
Yes.
Not at the funding opportunity, but at the program area. And this is why sometimes your claims people can't see certain things because you don't have the settings that allow it. So if you have a program area and you want to check this out, that's a good idea to go back through here. We did talk a lot about it at the migration time, but if you notice things that aren't set up correctly or the way that you would like them to be, please let us know and we can make sure that those are changed. Okay, this has been very helpful, 45 minutes, so thank you very much. Okay, I will go ahead and stop the recording and then I will get this sent out to you.